All right. Thank you for allowing us to present on PennDOT's Digital Delivery Directive 2025. My name is Alan Melly, and I am out of central office in Harrisburg, and I am one of the digital delivery leads for this project. Along with me today is Connor Christian, HDR's BIM project manager, to talk about this initiative. So today, what we'll do is go over basically what is digital delivery, our directive overview. Then we'll get into the current project status, a look ahead at 2021, what's coming up, and what's going to happen beyond 2021. So let's start with the directive overview. So PennDOT's vision for the digital delivery directive is by 2025, construction projects will be bid using 3D technology and no longer be in a traditional construction plan format. This will include the also plans such as your traffic control plan, E&S plan, etc. While we do realize that some plans don't lend themselves to being done or modeled in 3D, that does not mean that they will not be done digitally. This is all about the transfer of data through our project cycle. So, what is digital delivery? Digital delivery is that use of digital data to deliver projects. We are going to transfer data between all aspects of our project, looking at design, construction, asset management. So with that and that transfer of data, it's going to afford us new ways to view and understand that project in the field. So we'll be able to see that bridge interact right with the roadway project. We'll be able to rotate that plan. We'll be able to look at the ditch, how it interacts with the roadway, with the bridge. We'll be able to see this in new ways that we were never afforded before. So it's also going to be a way to capture as-built asset information during construction acceptance. This will be very important to us as we transfer that data. Again, we develop a lot of information in design, then we transfer it to construction. Right now, we break that down into 2D plan sheets. So we break that digital connection and all of that information. A lot of times it's lost, put on the shelves in a file folder that nobody can find later on. Well, we want to maintain that data as we advance these projects. So we're going to take that from design, move it to construction. Construction's then going to provide us with the digital as-built of that project. So we will be able to track everything from paint lines, delineators, guide rail, every asset that we want to have information about, we will be able to track. Right now, we are good at tracking pavements and bridges, but beyond that, we're not as good at tracking that. So we will build this information into this digital delivery directive to be able to capture all of that as-built information to bring it back into our asset management systems. That way we'll be able to query if we're having an issue with a paint line or a type of guide rail. We'll be able to query statewide where that was installed and know exactly when it was installed. Then we'll be able to use that information back around. It's that complete life cycle of a project that we'll be able to utilize that information again in design whenever we come back to that project. So what's really driving this change? So the amount of data that we're producing by the new software and hardware is really becoming hard to manage. You know, our organizations are being flooded with data in the forms of spreadsheets, PDFs, CAD files. You know, storing this information while also giving everybody access to it is becoming increasingly difficult. So according to a McKiskey report, employees spend an average of 1.8 hours every day searching for information required to do their jobs. So that, and it's only going to get worse as we, expand on this digital information. So if we don't start to focus on how we structure this information and just instead of, how we're creating it, it's going to, snowball and become harder and harder and more hours in order to find that correct information. So where are we? Where are we going? We broke this project down into 3 phases. Our first phase was really that development of the strategic plan. We went out to and broke the state into 4 different regions in order to get subject matter experts' opinions from each of the districts, our partners with ACEC, APC, Pennsylvania Turnpike, gathered everybody's feedback, information on developing this strategic plan. With the development of that strategic plan, we were able to issue that to the public in November of 2020. And with that, we were able to start our phase 2 portion of this project. Now, with this project, we are not going to flip a switch and have the projects be digital right away. We are going to take this crawl, walk, run approach. As we move forward, we're going to take up small steps. That way, we're going to get into pilot projects. Connor's going to actually get into some of the pilot projects that we're going to start here this year in the relative near future. But within that, we're going to build upon those. So we're going to be looking at our project delivery processes and procedures, our CAD standards, how we're developing this, our post-construction processes. So all aspects of our project delivery process. And our goal is to pilot a project in each phase: design, construction, asset management, in every year as we advance this. So by the time we hit phase 3, which is in 2024, 2025, we are ready to deploy this, this final deliverable. Now, as we advance these pilots, we are going to try to implement those as we go through. So once we find something that works, we're going to implement that on future projects. So it's, again, not going to be that flip of a switch. It's going to be that gradual implementation of all of these aspects once they're vetted and approved through our governance committee. So by 2025, we will be able to deliver the model as the legal document out to a contractor to be able to build our first digital delivery project. So with that, our current project status, I'm going to turn this over to Connor Christian of HDR to go over our current project status and what we have to look forward ahead. Connor?
All right, thank you. I will jump right into the current project. So what you see here is actually a roadmap infographic that we have created for the project. You'll probably see this in other presentations or on the website, moving forward. But the whole idea of this particular graphic is to give you an idea of what the project is about and what we are going to be working on. Now, to date, if you look at the little roadmap sign at the bottom that's labeled 2020, that first section of our project, which was really last year, was about creating a strategic plan. So in order to do that, we had workshops that we held with all of the districts and central office, where we invited a lot of different stakeholders, both inside of PennDOT and outside, inviting in ACEC, APC. And we gathered a lot of information about current practice, about what people are looking for, about what they think will work and what they don't think will work. And we put all that together into a strategic plan that was really identifying where the most value could be found in all of the many options that you have in a digital delivery process. So that was really all about 2020, and it did result in the strategic plan being issued, and it also resulted in some beginnings of some stakeholder outreach. And this roadmap is actually one of those items. But now as we've gotten into 2021, we've moved forward. I'll talk more about 2021 actually in a minute, but I do want to mention what we have done just in the beginning of this year, because there's still yet more to do. So mostly we've done that stakeholder outreach. Outside of creating this roadmap, we also worked to create a APC summit. So this was just held about a week ago, where we met with APC and they brought in some contractors so that we could talk about how digital delivery is going to be different for them. This summit consisted of a digital delivery software demonstration from software vendors, showing how digital delivery works in construction. And that included demonstrations from Bentley and Autodesk and Trimble, each of them showing how this process would work using their tools. We also had some contractor testimonials, in particular from Utah, and that was organized by Utah DOT, just bringing some of their contractors in that have worked on some of their digital delivery projects, and that was just to discuss their view of things on projects they've worked on. We also had a design demonstration that HDR performed, actually showing the contractors how the design process is changing in digital delivery and giving them a little bit of an expectation about what to see coming out of the design process. And we closed up with a couple of workshops, one going through a typical sheet set, discussing how the information in the sheet sets might be got at differently in the digital delivery process, how might be interfaced with differently if it was no longer delivered on a sheet. And then discussing their current processes in how those processes might change. Other stakeholder outreach that we've been working on here in 2021 include the project website. So this is something that's going to be put up onto PennDOT's website, and you can see that under projects and programs. There are a few different areas. When you first get to the website, it'll start with the About Digital Delivery Directive 2025. And this is just the first landing page where it's going to tell you a little bit about the project, give you probably another picture of that roadmap so you can come back and look at it in case you need to take a look at that. But outside of that, we'll also have upcoming events, and that'll be events similar to this one, where there's going to be some sort of presentation about the project, or events similar to the APC Summit, where we're having outreach about the project. It'll also highlight maybe when pilot projects are being done. So anything that's going on having to do with the project, there will be a place that you can come and see what's happening. We're also going to have a place for case studies. Now, obviously, this will not have anything on it to begin with, because we still have the pilot projects to do. But as we get through these pilot projects, we're going to be recording the successes and the case studies, and we're going to be placing them here for everyone to review. There'll be a place for resources, and this is going to be where you would go to get any of the deliverables or things associated with digital delivery. This is going to be where you're going to find your glossary of terms. We may have some procurement language here. This is where, as we start to create standards, if they'll either be here or there will be links to the proper places for those standards, and anything around digital delivery that you might need to perform it. This is going to be found under resources page. And last but not least, we'll have a frequently asked questions and a contact 3D 2025. These things are very related because you can send in questions by contacting us. There'll be a an email that's available there to reach out, ask questions, say you want to get involved, any of the above. And as you do ask questions and as those are answered, those will end up on the frequently asked question website. And that's one way we'll collect it. We'll probably also be collecting frequently asked questions from some of the presentations that we do. But all of that will be available on the website. Again, to give everybody a place to come together, understand what the project is, and understand how to be successful. So that's really what's happened to date, is we've gotten that strategic plan out, we've gotten a little bit of stakeholder outreach out there, and now it's time to start talking about what is going on for the rest of 2021. So looking at that roadmap, in 2021, the highlight was really about what we called quick start tools, or kind of quick wins. These were the things that we can do now to be successful and move the program forward while we simultaneously work on maybe some longer term items. So I'm going to go through what some of these items are, both the short term and the long term, that are being kicked off here in 2021. So one of our long-term items, we do plan on having this complete here in 2021. It just takes a little more work, is the process mapping. So this is literally going through and mapping out the process of design and construction and post-construction process. And this is all about understanding the difference between the current state and the end state when digital delivery is put into place. And I've done this before with other organizations, and what's interesting is that you typically find that the process itself doesn't change a whole lot, but the tools and the information exchanges, or the things exchanged between individuals, those are the things that change. And so this process mapping is about going through and finding all of the places where those changes occur, so that as we move forward, there's no one left out and no system left out when it comes down to looking at this. Because it's going to involve a lot of different stakeholders. It's going to involve a lot of different softwares and hardwares, and knowing every single point in the process where change happens allows us to look at each of those points and analyze them properly. And it's pretty easy to miss one if you don't map it out first, which is why this is one of the things that we're going to be starting with. We're also going to get our first look at the changes that need to happen, policies, standards, and guidance that's out there. We're going to start this off with a software and hardware review. So the software and hardware review is looking at the software that's being used at PennDOT and the hardware used by folks within PennDOT, and comparing that to what the use cases are for the digital delivery directive. So it'll go through and identify the software that's going to be used. And so if there was a use case like design review, there would be a software associated with that. And that software would have a certain set of hardware requirements. And then we're going to compare that against the different types of users and the hardware that's assigned to those users. And the end goal to this is to understand where there might be gaps or issues. Where is there a software that's going to be used that doesn't line up with the hardware of the user who's supposed to use it? Or where is the software supposed to be used that hasn't been purchased yet? Maybe there's a new type of software that needs to be purchased at PennDOT, and it just isn't there to support a use case. All of that's going to be identified through this review. We'll also be looking at procurement language. This one's pretty straightforward. You're not going to get your digital deliveries if you don't ask for them properly. And that's really what the procurement language is about, going through, checking the current procurement language and making sure that there's no holes, so that when when these projects get started, when pilot projects go, that they actually are requesting the proper things. Because a lot of times if it's not requested right, then it just doesn't get done. And then we are working on the glossary of terms. Again, this actually, I think, will be included on the website when it is stood up. But the glossary of terms is really just new terms that you might see associated with the Digital Delivery Directive. In 2021, we'll also be looking at CAD standards and support. A big part of this is going to be the modeling standards. There's two in particular that we're very interested in. One is called the model element breakdown. This is really all about the classification of any items that you may put into one of your projects. And this is really important because, Alan had mentioned that this is about the data and organizing the data. And one of the easiest ways to do that in the digital delivery process is to use 3D modeled elements as your data containers and standardizing what those containers are. And so one of the first things you can do is figure out what all the containers are you might have. And that is a model element breakdown. And when you begin a project, it often starts with looking at all of the possible items you might have and which ones actually are on the project. Is there a bridge? Is there not a bridge? And that ends up being how you communicate to someone what is going to be modeled specifically. Now, from there, an LOD specification or level of development specification builds upon that. So this is usually some sort of designation on how much information is supposed to be put into a model element or how much is supposed to be modeled. There'll be more about that in the glossary of terms, but for right now, just think of it as how much it's going to be modeled. And so when you combine your level of development specification with your modeling standards, you end up with a communication tool for whether it's internal or external. It communicates what is in a model so that when you give someone a model, it's understood when they get it, what they're supposed to see. Along with all this, we're going to be supporting ORD, evaluating the current maturity levels and helping set target states, making sure that there's training out there to get to those target maturity levels, helping to organize the data behind ORD for all of the reasons that we've already stated, that data deliverable does need to be organized, but taking a look at that initial setup, that's going to be part of this year. And then developing the workflows. And by workflows, I mean choosing how you use these digital delivery tools to successfully design what you're trying to design. And that might be, a design review workflow. That's going to be a little bit different in the digital delivery world. And we're just here to try and help make sure that you have the most efficient and effective methods in place. And then there will be pilot projects. And right now we are actually going through selecting some of the initial pilot projects for some of these things, but there are many possibilities. Some of the pilot projects we're looking at, one is the BIM execution plan pilot project. Now, a BIM execution plan, the easiest way for me to put it is the way an active project communicates how they are achieving the requirements that have been put forward. So I already mentioned that we'd be working on creating some of the digital delivery requirements in procurement language. And those tell a project team what they would like to have delivered. That's, PennDOT, whether they're asking internal designers or external designers, they say this is what we want. Well, the BIM execution plan is the item that tells them how the project achieves it. And so this is how that loop is closed in communication, and it ends up being a very important part of the BIM process. So we're going to be working with the project to do just that. Get started, create a BIM execution plan, and get that in place so that they're used to going through that planning process. We're also going to be doing a requirement for receiving as-built records. This is a project that we are, pilot project we are looking for projects on now. This is going to be, I think, focused on guide rail and gathering information about guide rail and figuring out how to organize that information and get it back into the asset management systems most effectively. We're going to be looking at creating a model review checklist. When it comes to model review, there are a couple different things to think about. The first thing you think about when it comes to model review is my model created the way that it's supposed to be created? And this is a really important check because you have to do that before you get to the next thing, which is what you want to do, which is actually check the model for whether or not it meets design criteria. But the one has to come before the other, because if you are bringing in a bunch of different models into a place to check them and they don't align with each other correctly, then the design review portion of it doesn't really work. And so that is why creating a model review checklist, so that before you go into things like a design review, you have had someone review that model to make sure that nothing is misaligned, that nothing is duplicated, that nothing is mislabeled. There's a bunch of little things like that to make sure that the model is actually made the way that it's supposed to be made, so that the downstream uses all function. And creating a checklist is one of the ways to make sure that functions best. And so that's one of the pilots we'll be working on. We're working on a single project PDF. That is another one we're actually actively looking for projects on. And this is kind of a step towards getting away from our typical plan sets. It still has a PDF that is generated. It still has a plan view. It still has a profile. But instead of cutting those into sheets, it's one big kind of, it's like a roll plot, but you never print it out. So you're going to be looking at this one plan and this one profile for the entire project. And again, the whole point is to get people to take a step away from relying on our traditional sheet sets. All the information will still be there. It's just going to be digested a little bit differently. And the last pilot project that we have that we're looking for right now for 2021 is rapid visualization. Now, this is about creating models very quickly during the planning phase for a couple of different uses. One, hopefully, we'll be able to get a rough order of magnitude on an estimate of what that project costs. But two, it also will be a pretty high-end kind of visualization like the one you're seeing in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen here. And that can be used to communicate these concepts to folks internally or to the public. And that's really the point of this pilot, to see how quick and easy we can make that workflow for both the creation and the communication of early planning. So that was everything that's kind of going on in 2021. But now I'm going to just kind of take a look at what happens after 2021. It's going to be a little less specific, a little more high level, but we do have some ideas of how these projects are going to roll out. So we'll start with 2022. So after this year, when we have taken all the time to kind of set up some of the requirements and set up some of the standards and some of the guidance, in 2022, there will be a strong focus on roadway modeling. So there's going to be pilot projects that are focused on the digital delivery of the roadway. We'll be working in the design phase. We'll be working in the construction phase. We'll be looking at how this might work with asset management, but it's all going to be very focused around roadway modeling. In 2023, we'll kind of focus more on the bridges. And so it's going to be a very similar kind of flow, that we'll be looking at pilot projects. We'll be looking at making sure that these pilot projects are running smoothly, that they're getting the guidance they need, that they're getting the training they need, and that this is happening in design and construction and asset management. And we'll have to kind of select these projects no matter what they are, because maybe there will be some that can go from design to construction just within that year, but maybe not. So maybe we select some that are going to be looking at the design, and we'll select others that might be looking at the construction and asset management. And so there's different ways to look at this, but it will be focusing in on the bridge workflow and all the requirements that go with those. And then we'll, in 2024, look at drainage and asset management requirements, maybe some utilities, kind of the things that are going to be that step beyond just the roads and bridges, all the appurtenances. How do we focus in on getting these, modeled, having the standards for them, tracking the data associated with them, throughout design, construction, and asset management. But the focus is definitely going to be in that area. And then in the last year, it's really going to be about kind of wrapping things up and getting this to be a standard process. So throughout these years, we're going to be going through these pilot projects, working to make sure they're successful. And as every pilot project gets done, I mentioned that we'll be creating these case studies. Well, when it comes to 2025, we'll have had lots of case studies. We'll have had lots of feedback. And with any good program around moving technology forward, there's always a step that includes continuous improvement or that look towards excellence or continued excellence. And that's where 2025 comes in. Because by this point, like Alan said, you'll have done pilot projects, and as they are completed and proven to be successful, they're all going to start being put in place. And so it's going to be a gradual build up to 2025. So by this time, you should have already been working on roads and bridges and all of the drainage. And now it's time to take a look and see if there's anything that needs to be improved upon. This is where we get the feedback and say, okay, these standards that we had, we got all of this feedback. Let's update those now. Any of the guidelines, any of the templates, any of the things that we have found that need to be tweaked, 2025 there at the end is the time to tweak it so that when the project is done and we are complete, everything is in the best shape possible for everyone to continue moving forward with the digital delivery process. So the focus is pilot projects, developing all of the uses in design and construction and asset management, and then updating and revising the guides and completing those BIM use guides so that by the end of it all, we have all the pilot project reports and case studies. You have all of the use guides you need to move forward. And we have a final project report that sums up what succeeded and maybe what didn't, and what the answers are for how to deal with that. Now, throughout this whole thing, we know that there's going to be some things that lead to success. One of those is to manage the pace of change. In technology, things change fast. But we are here to try and make sure that as things are changing, no one gets left behind. And all that really needs to be there to do that is thinking about how the process is happening and making sure we're managing it so that nothing gets away from us. Another one is helping people perceive progress. When this is rolled out, if this was rolled out in a black box, it would be really hard to get people on board because they don't see where you're being successful or where you're not being successful, and truly understanding how it's functioning. And that's why communication is going to be such a big part of this project. That's why there's going to be a website. That's why there's going to be summits and workshops and all kinds of other communications that we send out, because we need everyone to see and understand the change that is happening. Because otherwise it's really easy to not understand that the change is happening and not be a part of it. So helping people perceive the progress that's being made is going to be one of the keys to success. We also need to create a safe space for experimentation. In Silicon Valley, around innovation, their motto is fail fast and fail often. Now, that's not exactly what we want to do, but there are going to be bumps in the road along the way. And everyone has to realize that that is okay. And we're going to have the ability to do that. And that's going to be part of our pilot projects, and that's going to be part of the way we move forward, is truly understanding that it's not all going to work 100% the way we think it's going to the very first time, but it will get there. And part of that is about empowering our pilot project teams. I said fail fast, fail often, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to, make schedules, or it doesn't mean that we're going to bust our budgets. Those things are still going to happen. We're still going to get our projects designed and constructed on time. But we are going to make sure that through our bumps and bruises that we have along the way, that you have all the tools and all the training, all the backup you need to be successful. And that's really what empowering our pilot project teams is about. And then, of course, there's our construction partnering. We can't do this without our contractors. They're going to be a huge part of this being successful. And so just like our APC Summit, we're going to be looking at getting feedback from our contractors and working hand in hand with them to make sure that digital delivery continues to be successful and that our projects are getting built. And with that, I believe that we have some time for questions, and we also have the contact info out here for Mark and Alan for anyone who needs it. Thank you.